welcome everybody. If you got it from Estelle, that's great, but I'm Juliet Yelverton from Healing Waters Sanctuary in Glastonbury, and I just want to really thank you today on this beautiful day to actually take your time to be in here to listen to what I have to share with you, so a big thank you to you. And would you like to join me for a moment in a moment of reflection and self-healing? So my vision is to heal the trauma of the planet, to heal all the trauma of the planet. So we'll come back to that in a moment, but healing trauma starts with ourselves. So if you want to, but you don't have to participate, would you be happy to put your hand on your heart? And just to wish yourself really well. May I be happy. May I be healthy. And may I be free from suffering. And I would like to send that energy out to the world. May everyone on the planet be happy, and may we all be healthy, and may we all be free from suffering. So just spending a moment and just making yourself comfortable, just being aware of feelings of comfort in your body, because feeling comfortable and feeling safe is a really important part of healing. We can't heal if we feel unsafe or uncomfortable. So just notice, just take a moment and notice how you're feeling. Can you feel your feet on the floor? Can you feel yourself sitting on your seat? Can you locate a sensation of comfort in your body somewhere? And if you're not able to locate a feeling of sensation, is there something that you remember, a place that you like to go to, something you like to do that fills you with a feeling of well-being? Just bring it to mind for a moment and reflect upon it. And just taking a breath into that and allowing yourself to settle more deeply into that feeling of well-being and comfort. And then when you're ready, just opening your eyes again and coming back to the room. So thank you everyone for taking that risk to share that moment with me. I just want to share that I'm feeling really nervous standing here. It's a hard thing for me to put myself in front of people, and you know, it's a very exposing feeling. And I just want to honour that each one of us have things every day that we feel challenged by, and that somehow or other we conduct our lives, we go through life, and we do the best that we can, each one of us. So for some reason, Spirit seems to have given me the task of working with healing trauma, and I have had a lot of first-hand experience of trauma, unlike Estelle's experiences of, if you were here to listen to her, not so much in that kind of way, but I've had a lot of trauma that's affected me emotionally and physically. So the kind of trauma that I had was as a child, a lot of neglect as a child. I then had several relationships, marriages that were very abusive, and I had several children that died after birth. And in addition to that, I've had a number of car accidents, and basically my life has been a continuation from a roller coaster from one traumatic event to the next. And about 25 years ago I started training to be a healer because I wanted to get a deeper understanding of what was going on. And then when my children were born, I actually gave birth 6 times to 6 babies, all born prematurely, and I really needed to understand how to help them. And I started training first as a craniosacral therapist, and then I began to specialise in birth trauma and to understand what was going on with my births, and to be able to help both my children and other people. So yes, it's been a long journey, and I've now feel that I'm much happier in my life than I ever was. I had a lot of my life where I was really, really terribly unhappy, terribly tragically unhappy, with such anguish that you can't imagine. But that's all gone, and I'm feeling really good in my life, and really committed to this vision of healing trauma on the planet. And that sounds like a really big thing, but what I've learned about trauma is that trauma continually recycles. When we have it in our system, until we heal it, we recycle it. And this is why I had 3 accidents. This is why I had 3 marriages, because trauma has a way in the psyche of rerunning, and it's saying, wake up, wake up, wake up. And when you finally get the message, you'll make some changes in yourself. So the energy of trauma just draws the same event to you over and over again, and it can draw it to your children. It can pass on down. Sorry, my voice is a bit quaverous. I'm a bit, as I said, nervous. It can pass down generations. So when I talk about healing the trauma of the planet, I mean if we can stop the recycling of trauma, then we can significantly change what happens on the planet. So trauma is a natural consequence of being a human being. So human beings, like animals, have the part of their brain which is involved in allowing us to survive in life-threatening situations. So an animal, if faced with a life-threatening situation, will have the activation from the rear brain telling it to fight or flight, or if that doesn't work, the activation will cause what's called tonic immobility and collapse. All the energy will go to the heart, heartbeat will really slow down, and the animal will literally stop and drop down and become numb, so that if it's eaten or something, it won't feel the pain. So human beings and animals share that. Now the difference is that an animal, after an experience of being in a life-threatening situation or a perceived life-threatening situation, an animal can get up and shake itself. It will shake and jolt and shudder, and it will release these frozen trauma energies from the body. For some reason, human beings don't do that. Because we have the frontal brain, we interfere with the process. So we have the energies of trauma, the energies of the life-threatening situation get locked into our body, and we become traumatized. So a trauma is a dysregulation of the nervous system. We're unable to release the trauma energies from our body. And that's because it's social conditioning, or like pull yourself together, don't show you're upset, don't cry, get on with it, all those things that we do to interfere with just releasing the frozen trauma energies. Like, oh, I'm going to look a fool if I shake or I cry. You know, it's so plumbed into us, you know, not to react, not to release. Plus, the releasing of the energies can feel very overwhelming and frightening and dramatic. So it's like when I'm in a session with a client and they start to shake, allow yourself to shake. This is going to free you up. So human beings get traumatized. Now, the sorts of events that cause trauma are very many. We might have an idea that trauma is, if you've been in a natural disaster or a huge crash, or you've been held at gunpoint. All those things will cause you to be traumatized. But actually, many, many circumstances in life can cause you to become traumatized. And it will change according to who you are and how resourced you are and what's going on in your life. So for a very small child, baby for instance, being shouted at can traumatize the child. So there are many, many events on a day-to-day basis that can happen to us that can cause us to be traumatized. And the sorts of things, any sudden life-threatening event, anything where, oh my God, I'm going to die in this split second, something unexpected happens, any kind of accident, any kind of medical intervention can leave you feeling very traumatized, because to the body, if you undergo an operation, that is a trauma. Although your mind knows that, okay, this is meant to be helping me, the body's experiencing it as an attack on the body. It's life-threatening to have surgery. Relationships, difficult relationships where you're threatened. Being in a relationship with an abusive partner, being in a relationship with a partner that's addicted, alcoholism, drug addiction. Being a child in a family with that kind of addiction, any kind of family situation which doesn't seem on when you look in at it, that actually anything life-threatening is happening, but it's the drip-by-drip effect on a child that is subjected to an environment where there's a withdrawal of love, or where parents can't express love, where the child feels empty and alone and afraid, or a child that is criticised endlessly. He can't exist, there's no space for me, I can't breathe. And I've had clients that have gone through this as children, have been very traumatised. A child that's bullied, being in a relationship with a partner that's not responding to you. Many, many things. Has anybody experienced any of these things that I've mentioned so far? Yeah? Can anybody volunteer any other situations that might be traumatic?
Well, you just said about shaking.
Yeah.
Well, on January I think it was the 15th, I went to see a psychologist because they didn't know whether I've got ADHD. Diagnosis. I shook again, and when you said, I didn't know at the time, but obviously it released a lot in me, because and I've never experienced that with the other traumas I've had. But the actual shaking seems to lift it.
Yes, we need to learn to let it out when these situations happen.
And when you said about shook, I didn't know why I did it, but I just literally shook all over.
Because a human being can release the same as an animal, but we have to lift the social conditioning, and we have to create the right circumstances in which we can release the trauma, heal the trauma that we've experienced. So over time we may suffer many traumas in our life, and we might get through one of them and it's fine, there's no obvious effects, but after a number of events, then suddenly it's like the straw that broke the camel's back. It was after my third car accident, which was after all the abusive relationships and deaths. It was the third car accident that I got the very severe symptoms, and then I had post-traumatic stress disorder. But symptoms can gradually build up over time, and you don't necessarily relate them directly with the experience. Like, okay, I had a car accident, but I'm okay. But 6 months down the line, you might be experiencing nightmares, or suddenly some kind of obsessive behaviour. There's a whole range of behaviour which is diagnosed as like ADHD, for instance, that could be...
Actually, when you said about the neurons and the frontal lobes, if I'd have had the right chemicals, I wouldn't have struggled. I did have traumas on top.
Yeah.
But if you got the basics in your brain that everybody else has got to do the basics, you'd have done much better.
That's right.
Neurological thing.
That's right. So
And it does make a difference, and because you said it's the frontal lobes, times I had headaches, like I used to say, hammers in my head.
So there are many symptoms that we have in our daily lives that we may not identify as being a result of trauma, and often people are misdiagnosed in the medical profession. I've had a lot of clients that are actually on antidepressants, sleeping tablets, and then the psychotherapist, the psychologist have said, sorry, we can't do anything else for you. Drugs don't necessarily help. They do have a place sometimes when symptoms are so intense. But the root of many of these conditions, the root is trauma, and it's unacknowledged in the medical profession, and it's unknown by many people in society that we get traumatized on a regular basis, and but we can heal it. So another area where we can experience trauma, which you wouldn't think of, it is in our prenatal lives. And I don't know if has anybody in the room had any kind of experience from pre-birth, anything in the womb that's happened? You have, Estelle, on my prenatal trauma resolution workshop. Any memories of pre-birth?
It just sounds very traumatic.
Yeah, very traumatic. Any point from ovulation, when we're an egg in the ovary ovulating, or when we're a sperm on the way to meeting the egg, through to conception, through to the journey of the blastocyst down the fallopian tube, to implantation of the blastocyst in the mother's womb. All those events are potentially traumatizing. In fact, most of us carry trauma from that time, because each of those stages are life-threatening. I think about a third of all embryos that are conceived actually make it through and get born as human beings. It's really hard to be born as a human being. There are so many threats to our survival along the way. It's so difficult for conception to take place. It's so difficult for the sperm to make the journey to the egg, or the egg to find its way from the ovary to the opening of the fallopian tube to be able to enter to meet the sperm, for conception to take place. It's so very hard for the blastocyst to travel down the fallopian tube. Many people experience what's known as core starvation in that stage, because the blastocyst only has about a week to make it down the fallopian tube, and it's a little cluster of cells like a blackberry, rapidly dividing, and the source of nourishment is what's known as the fallopian milk, the secretions in the fallopian tube, and as it gets bigger and bigger, it can't get that nutrition through to the core, so the core of the blastocyst can experience starvation. So just want to take a moment and I'm going to ask you to breathe, take a breath, feeling your feet on the ground, because this can be very activating if you've got this stuff in your system, you can become activated. So is anybody in the room aware of intensity in heartbeat or anxiety or tension? Feeling a bit disconnected, a bit spacey, not present? Is that happening to anyone? You all okay? Good, okay. So put your hand up if you feel like, hang on a minute, this is too much for me. So, yes, and then for the blastocyst to implant in the womb, it's also very challenging, because the mother's womb may not be receptive. The mother may not be ready to be pregnant. The mother may have been raped, for instance, and definitely doesn't want to be pregnant. So, but the blastocyst, us, when we were a blastocyst, we have that experience of it. Like, what was it like to implant into your mother's womb? Was it nurturing and fertile for you, or was it rejecting in some way? And then there's the experience of, how does your mother feel when she discovers she's pregnant with you? This in itself is annihilating. If the mother has a huge shock to find she's pregnant with you. Everything that happens to the mother comes through the fallopian tube to the baby. Feelings, emotions, environmental toxins, the emotions of the family all come through the umbilical cord to the baby, and you experience it as a baby as chemicals coming into your system. Many people with problems, digestive problems, colitis for instance, have a history of having quite a difficult time in the womb. Babies have been known to actually, well they do, they clamp the cord to stop things coming in. This is called umbilical affect because you carry this as adults. If you tension yourself around here when you get stressed, anybody do that? Yeah? The baby is able to put in blocks here, it blocks here to prevent the toxins going up, and also then it pedals its legs a lot to try and get it out of its system. So you might see babies born sometimes and they're like really rigid and tense in their body and they're like kicking a lot. So that's up to what's called the discovery stage. It's very traumatic, but then the birth itself is extraordinarily traumatic. Our births are very traumatic, but it's not really reflected back to us by the medical profession that our births are traumatic, but they are. The average human head is larger than the average pelvic outlet. So the birth process is very, very terrifying. So we need to revolutionize our birthing system so that mothers and babies are really supported, so that there's the least amount of trauma in the birthing process, where mothers are given the freedom to move their bodies and be in communion with the baby, so we can move our bodies in the right directions, knowing exactly how the baby is moving down through the birth canal, so that the baby can negotiate and navigate its way through the pelvis with the least damage to its body. Because babies are born with broken noses. When you go away from here, if you notice people's faces, nobody's face is symmetrical. You might have an eye pushed in, the side of your face dragged down, the nose to the side, a shoulder can be dislocated. All that is from birth. We all carry these signs in our body. We've all had a lot of trauma, even before we get born. And then that unresolved trauma that's happened anywhere from preconception through to birth, this energy of how trauma recapitulates itself, how it recycles, we start replaying that in our lives. So I understood that a lot of the patterns that were happening to me in my life was a result of what had happened in the womb. For instance, having partners that were very disconnected, emotionally absent, was a recapitulation of my mother who was not able, probably because she's carrying trauma herself, but she was not present for me as a baby in the womb. It was a very annihilating experience for me in the womb. And so I carried on trying to find love and connection in my life, and it was a very long and painful journey. So that's how trauma can happen, and there are many, many symptoms and many circumstances, but the good news is that it's really quite easy to heal it. And the healing is working through the body. That this is one method, or using some of the tools that Estelle has got. There are other methods out there for working on trauma. I've seen other people working here today that work with trauma in different ways. It's possible to heal trauma, but it's important to be conscious of it. And the important thing to know is that to heal trauma, it's not necessary to go back to that traumatic incident. If you were raped, for instance, it's not necessary to go back and relive that whole experience. You don't have to go back to that experience of being in a car crash or any of those other things, or the pain of your birth. What is necessary is to create safety and well-being in your life. This is why I've put together now a number of healing tools and resources that is there on our website that we can give out to people to resource themselves to be able to take a step-by-step approach to healing the trauma that they have in their bodies. So safety and resourcing are the number one approaches, irrespective of what other techniques that you use. It's important to build safety in your life, because trauma happened as a result of feeling profoundly unsafe when you thought you were going to die. Either you thought you were going to die or you're actually going to die, but either way you're profoundly unsafe. And when you build safety back into your life, when you step by step you build a sense of safety in your daily experiences, then you can start to heal. So when we started, I asked you to notice your contact on the chair, your feet on the ground. This is a little tiny taster of the approach to somatic work. So basically the brain, once you've had an experience of trauma, the animal part of the brain is functioning all the time. The smallest thing will trigger the brain to send out signals that you're in danger. So if you're in a car crash and you happen to glance down just at the moment you had the collision, that you had a yellow bag on the seat, after that time, later in your life, whenever you see a yellow bag or the colour yellow, for instance, it can happen that that becomes a trigger, and the energies of that trauma, the activation, the intensity of the adrenaline and the collapse feelings get triggered again, and suddenly you're in a highly active state, highly activated state. Now most of us are going around in high levels of activation the whole time because we're being triggered by all sorts of things the whole time.